Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Govinda 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 Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bol, Hari Hari Bol, Hari Hari Bol. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasanyavari Paschachira Satarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangulangayate Girim Akripatamaham Bande Siguru Dinatarinam Vanshakapaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadaita Gadadhar Shivashari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're going to continue reading. We have a lot more to read. And someone may question why we are reading these things. We should be talking about Leela. We should be talking more about Shastric philosophy. And the reason is because I believe this topic is important. And we do talk about Leela and Shastric philosophy. And there's a lot of Leela and Shastric philosophy available all over ISKCON, all over the internet. But this topic we're talking about is not talked about. I don't think anyone's really publicly given classes on this topic. So that's why I'm doing this. So obviously, some people would rather hear Leela. And I have to apologize. But you will hear some Prabhupada Leela, some reference to Shastra, but maybe not as deeply as normally. But the topic is relevant. A lot of devotees have written me and saying it's helping them. So we're going to continue in that spirit. That's the spirit, everyone. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we're continuing. We will continue to read. We're on page 3, and this is 17 pages. So we should become quite expert at what is spiritual bypassing or avoiding what may be important in our spiritual life in the name of renunciation. Spiritual practices are also often used to avoid uncomfortable feelings and unresolved life situations, which can reinforce a tendency towards coldness, disengagement. Disengagement means not interacting much with people, not really, well, you could say not working well with people, not wanting to engage, or interpersonal distance. You know, sometimes in spiritual life, we talk about the hermit wants to be alone. Sometimes we need to be alone, but we can't do this process alone. And so it becomes a handicap if we don't know how to get along well with other devotees because we need their association. This then makes it impossible for them to relate directly with their feelings and express them personally and in a transparent way. Transparent means that you understand what your feelings are and you express them as you experience them. You're not trying to fake it to look good. It can be quite threatening to face our woundedness or emotional dependency or primal need for love. So we've talked about this idea that sometimes you find out something about yourself or you start to understand something about yourself and it's very difficult to acknowledge because it would kind of destroy your conception of being maybe more Krishna conscious or maybe being a nicer person than you are. We all like to think we're nice people, and it's hard if someone tells us you did something, it wasn't nice. It's really hard to hear that. if you think you're a nice person and you think everything you do is nice. So we have a self-conception. If reality gives us feedback, showing us that our self-conception may be wrong in some area, it can be very difficult. And so some of us don't want to go there, so we'll just shut it down. We won't acknowledge it. And probably blame the person. What do you know? Who are you? I've been a devotee longer. Excuses that have nothing to do with the fact that we did something wrong. And you may have seen this before with yourself or others. This is often common of narcissistic people. You say something and they'll, you were late. Yeah, but my father, he's like, you can't believe what he did today. And then he doesn't deal with the issue. It just talks about how bad his father is. You think I was late? He's my father. He was never on time. He was so bad. So one time he was making us wait in a car for an hour while he was shopping, and it was hot. They just like divert. So I'm not saying everyone who diverts is narcissistic, but diversion may come because it's really difficult for us sometimes to acknowledge things as they are. How could I make a mistake? I'm not the kind of person who makes mistakes like that. I don't know if you've had that experience, like something has gone wrong and someone said, did you do that wrong? And you can't comprehend. I wouldn't do that. But later it may be found out that actually you did do it. You just, because you couldn't comprehend it, you couldn't even admit it. And then you start thinking, actually, I was fooling around with that last week. I must have broken it. But it goes against your self-conception. So it's hard to acknowledge something that goes against who you think you are. Of course, our self-conception, when it's not accurate, then it exacerbates this problem. Because if I think I'm this, but I'm actually that, and people tell me I'm that, I can't hear it because I think I'm this. You're crazy. I couldn't have done that. No, you did it. It's not possible. And you did it and you can't acknowledge it because you thought you're like this. And we've talked about that before, how sometimes it gets so bad that you can have really bad attitudes and mean behavior towards someone and have no recognition that you were mean. Your only recognition is, I was just instructing them. They deserve that. They need to hear that. I was just being compassionate. So you think you're compassionate, but objective observers saw you were very upset and you were condescending. So it would be difficult for you when someone says, you weren't nice to that person. You were very condescending. No, I wasn't condescending. They had to be straightened out. Yeah, well, there's other ways to straighten people out. So that kind of situation. So the sooner you can be more introspective and self-reflective objectively, the better. And it's a sign of maturity. And one of the greatest ways to know how mature or immature you are is just how much responsibility you're willing to take for what you're creating. And if you're not willing to take responsibility for what you're creating, basically you're still kind of an adolescent, even though you may be older, in terms of maturity and level of responsibility. So the quickest way to grow is take responsibility. The quickest way to grow is do things that are difficult. The quickest way to grow is stop making excuses and just live up and hone up to who you are and what you are. And then that's how you become an adult. And the world needs more adults. The world doesn't need a bunch of 30-year-old adolescents who are afraid to grow up because they think it's not fun to grow up. You suffer tremendously that way on every level, spiritually, materially. So from my experience, I would say that, and I think we all understand this, that when you come to spiritual life, there's this paradox that goes on that you feel you don't want to feel like a failure because in your material life, if you fail, you just maybe fail yourself, or but now you're talking about failing God, or maybe you failed your mother or father. But that's not as bad as failing God and Guru. So, it's difficult to admit that I failed God. I made a vow to God, I didn't follow it. One time I asked devotees, I said, would you ever lie to God? I said, no way, no way. Well, did you ever take a vow you didn't follow? Yeah. So that vow to Krishna and you didn't follow it. So you did lie to God. But if I say that, it's like, no, I wouldn't lie to God. It's hard to admit it, right? Sooner we can admit it, the sooner we can solve it and develop a mindset that, I am going to fail and I'm going to feel some guilt and it is going to be difficult. But the sooner that I can learn how to deal with that, okay, I feel ashamed. Okay, understandable. But it's not, you can't use that as an excuse for going into the mode of ignorance, or an excuse for not being enthusiastic, or an excuse for anything that's not productive. You have to learn how to deal with it. And one way to deal with it is to ignore it. One way to deal with it is to blame another person, which of course is not dealing with it. So the longer we continue in those patterns, the longer we remain adolescents in adult bodies. And we're running into all kinds of walls. We don't even see the walls. The walls are hurting us. And it's like, why am I doing so bad in my spiritual life? Because you ran into walls that you didn't see. And you were so numb, you didn't feel them because you couldn't admit that could actually happen. But now with your eyes open and you can admit it and say, oh, there's a wall there. I'm actually running into this wall. Now I can work my way around it, or knock a hole through it, or somehow or other get to the other side. So a lot of us are afraid to grow up because we think growing up is really not fun. It's much more fun to just be irresponsible. But factually, it's just the opposite, because you never feel fulfilled until you're responsible. It's just the way the world is. And we get it backwards. You think, no responsibility. I just do what I want. And then I'll just be chilled out and happy. No, you won't be happy. It's not possible. And then there's plenty of depressed people out there to verify, in case you want to do, just if you need to verify it, there's plenty out there. So now we come to spiritual life. In a sense, the stakes are higher. Looking good in spiritual life is harder than looking good materially. Materially, it's a little easier to fake it. Just put a lot of makeup on, get a job with a big company, and go to the secondhand shop and buy like really expensive clothes that aren't expensive anymore, and you can fool people, right? Or get a degree from a good university. You can also fool them. But spiritual life, you can't really fool it. You can't just go in the temple and roll on the ground and start crying and think everyone's going to believe you're in ecstasy. No. You can't fool spiritual. You can't really fool people. Spiritual. And if you try to fool people, then everybody knows that you're just a neophyte, because that's what neophytes do. So it's like, the sooner you understand that, the easier it is to just stop trying to fool people and realize that there's no benefit in doing that. And I can just, do what I have to do and acknowledge my mistakes and learn how to navigate in spite of all those mistakes. And people may point out my faults, and rightly so, and accept it and learn how to deal with it. That's how you make advancement. Now, sometimes devotees will say, so-and-so is being critical of me, or they're being unjust or unfair. And of course, we wish that didn't happen, but it does happen. And of course, the person who's being unjust will say, I'm not being unjust. I'm being very considerate. I'm just trying to explain something to this person. So whatever the case, may be, that you think they're unjust or they actually are. The reality is that this injustice is not going to be the first and last injustice of your life. It's going to continue because we're in the material world. And rightly or wrongly, whether we're accused rightly or wrongly, we need to understand something really important. We need to learn how to deal with it, even if we're wrongly accused. So I get a lot of letters, a lot of WhatsApp messages from people who've been mistreated. And they have a really difficult time, especially because the person who mistreated them was not supposed to mistreat them. They were their guardians or superiors, mentors, sometimes even the guru. Really hard to deal with. And I was thinking yesterday, you know how hard it is sometimes to tell people that this material world is a place of suffering, like they don't want to hear it. And I was thinking the way we have to explain this is that if there is let's say a big pothole up front on the road and you have to take a detour and it's going to slow down your trip. And if I tell you that it's bad news, it's going to discourage you because you want to get to, the beach in an hour, but now it's going to take you 2 hours. So I'm the bearer of bad news. But I can give you an alternative route so you don't go this way and you'll get there faster. But I have to first bear the bad news. And it's just a reality. So I'm not being pessimistic. It's a fact. And this is what we can do about it. And so if I present to you that you're going to get old and you're going to die, the reason I'm presenting it to you is because it's true and most people don't prepare for it and they don't think about it. So by me telling you, I'm raining on your parade of this fantasy that you're not going to get old and die, but actually you are. And if I can help you face it, that's the best thing I can do for you. And if you actually learn how to face these things and deal with them, you'll be much better off than if you put your head in the sand. So it's the same idea. You have a difficulty, it's an injustice, I shouldn't be treated this way, or Tanya was treated improperly by someone, and now I'm upset because she shouldn't be treated that way. Then Gabriella finds out, and think, yeah, this is unfair, and then she gets upset because I've seen other devotees treated that way in my temple, and then we're all like, fire coming out of smoke coming out of our ears. And so it's not that we're not going to feel that way. But the point is, we're going to have to realize that we are going to feel that way from time to time, and we have to learn how to deal with it rather than, oh, this is it, that's it. I'm not going to stop chanting, this movement's bogus. That's the immature, irresponsible behavior. We don't want to take the responsible path. So the point is, this pothole that I pointed out, it's not going to be the only pothole. It's not going to be the only pothole that you're going to confront in your life. There are going to be more. And so if I can help you learn how to deal with this one, you'll be able to deal with the other ones and you'll be good. You'll be in a good position, right? So I think this is extremely important because, we want justice and we want to rectify problems, but sometimes the best solution, or sometimes the only solution, is to rectify our consciousness, not to condone it, not to say it was okay or it was right, but it was what it was. And I have to be mature enough to take responsibility for my life so that this event is not going to throw me off my game of Krishna consciousness, because there's plenty of things that can throw you off, right? You can, if you want to get upset, there's so many things to get upset about within ISKCON and outside. And of course, some things we should be upset about, the cheating that's going on, and the ignorance that's going on, and so forth. But if we become affected negatively or obsessed with it, that's a problem. Or if we worst thing we can do is not take responsibility to put ourselves in the right consciousness so we can continue in Krishna consciousness, but rather blame someone or something for my own disturbance. Okay, this is disturbing, but just because it's disturbing doesn't mean I have to be disturbed by it. That's, there's a difference. Okay, this is disturbed. This is something should be done, but I'm ranting and raving now, all over the internet, agitating everybody. That's getting obsessive. That's not mature. Unless, there's a lot at stake there. And ranting and raving is the only way anyone's going to listen. Sometimes that's the case. But if you're ranting and raving every day, that's not good. Things are not good. Trouble in paradise. Hare Krishna. In his psychotherapeutic practice, Wellwood observed that often a person's attempts to be non-attached were their strategy to defend themselves from their human and emotional weaknesses, and a way of avoiding deep personal engagement, which may stir up old wounds and longings for love. Wellwood expressed it this way, quote, "It's painful to see someone maintaining a stance of detachment when underneath they are starving for positive experiences of bonding and connection." Of course, I think we had this question in the last class. Well, how do you know how detached you are? My answer would be, just assume it's a lot less than you think. And you think you're up here, just bring it down, and you're probably, bring it down at least 50%, and you're probably like hit the target. Yeah. We are conditioned souls. Bhagavatam says, he uses this word, conditioning is deeply rooted. So if you've ever seen a tree, uprooted tree, or not even uprooted tree, you can see how deeply rooted they are. So our conditioning is very deeply rooted. And so our detachment from this world, not easy. And let's just assume we often think we're more detached than we are. And I think we talked about that on Monday. Sometimes when you lose something that you thought you were not attached to, it's only at that point that you realize how attached you were. So we have a human side. He's talking here, this human side, about the need for relationship, the need for affection, to give and have affection. And he's really focusing, it seems that he's focusing on this idea, that in the name of detachment, I'm giving up my need for love and affection. But any devotee who is advancing in Krishna consciousness knows that you need loving, affectionate relationships with other devotees. It doesn't have to be in marriage. Or additionally, marriage is not the only thing. You need loving, affectionate relationships with other devotees. So, and if we don't know how to do that, and also, or maybe don't want to do it in the name of detachment or the name of whatever, shutting down the feelings that everybody has for love and affection, then it becomes a problem. One of the things we see, anytime you isolate yourself, anytime anyone isolates themselves, they lose objectivity, because we all think differently. And so you only have one angle of vision. I have a different angle. Gabrielle has a different angle. Olga has a different angle. Gopi has a different. Sydney, we talk about something. You ever have meetings, and people are coming up with ideas and think, I never thought of that, because your mind doesn't work that way. So that's one of the reasons we need association, is to help us broaden our vision, because we only have a certain view. Of course, as we grow, we're hopefully expanding our vision, but there's always someone that has a nuanced vision or a completely different idea. So we need that sangha. And as he's saying here, we need love and affection. We need to be able to talk about what's going on in our lives. We need to feel some appreciation. So we need to feel valued. You get that in friendships, in close relationships. So there's something really, really interesting that was studied by Dr. John Gottman. And they found that married couples live longer. Poor sannyasis, I don't know. I'm not going to live so long. So, well, that's good. Go back to Godhead sooner. So he said, because where there's, well, I can't say that sannyasis don't have loving relationships with other sannyasis and other God brothers. So maybe they will live as long. But I think the point was where they're close, intimate, loving relationships, that has a positive effect on the body. And you live longer. So he went so far as to say, if you spent 20 minutes a day working on your relationship, if you only had 20 minutes a day to either go to the gym or work on your relationship, you would be healthier if you worked on your relationship. That's really interesting. That's just the research. That's what the research shows. You'll be healthier working on your relationship for 20 minutes as opposed to exercising. Not that you shouldn't exercise, but if you had to take one or the other, you would be healthier working on having a good relationship. It's quite interesting. So what we're talking here about, or what we're reading about, is human needs that sometimes are denied in the name of renunciation, or denied in the name of being uncomfortable with some feelings we have which are not so Krishna conscious. Naturally, you'll feel uncomfortable because it's not Krishna conscious, right? We have this word in English, yucky. How does it feel? It feels yucky. So, and when a feeling is yucky and it's not Krishna conscious, the instinctive reaction for many of us is just ignore it, turn it off, bury it, suppress, repress, resist. And those are just other words for avoidance, avoiding the problem, basically. And that's the good news for today. Yeah, so you can all go to your closets after class, open up all the skeletons and invite them out and say, okay, skeletons, we're going to talk to you today. We're going to deal with it. We have to write a song. Skeletons in the closet, we're inviting you to come out. We need to talk about what's going on. Something like that. Also could be a t-shirt, right? Have you talked to the skeletons in your closet lately? Have you said hi to the skeleton? Have you invited the skeletons in your closet out lately? So what he's saying, we can discuss in relation to Krishna consciousness, and we can see how true and relevant it is or isn't. Wellwood proposes that we need to first become fully human before we are able to transcend our humanity. We are not just human beings learning to realize our eternal, wise, joyful nature as parts and parcels of Krishna, but spiritual beings having a human existence. We are marginal, which means we have one foot in both the spiritual and material realm. And so both our human and spiritual natures must work together to realize ourselves while we are embodied. Both aspects of ourselves must be nourished in order to be mentally balanced and whole. So the simple point is being made here. And I think this simple point could sum up everything that we have read and likely will read, is that we are not just spirit soul. Okay, I'm taking to spiritual life, so now it's just I'm a spirit soul. That's all I am. Everything else is illusion. All right, well, if it's illusion, stop eating. See how that works for you. So, of course, we wouldn't stop eating. That we would know that's foolish. So, what about the other aspects of your life? Emotion, mind, intelligence, all these things. You can't ignore them. They have to be dealt with. That's the point. So, as long as we're encaged in a physical body, we have to give some attention to what's going on. You know that little pain in your knee that you said, that's nothing. And then you go to the doctor a year later and he said, you know, if you would have come earlier, we wouldn't need the operation. You ever have that experience? Well, it's more common with the dentist, I think. Sometimes it's like that, it's a little thing. So sometimes we just don't want to deal with it. It's a little pain, we ignore it. Pain gets worse, we ignore it. And then when it's too painful, it's getting our attention. And it would have been easier to deal with previously. So there's probably a misconception amongst many devotees that because now I'm practicing spiritual life, the other aspects of my being are not that important and we should minimize. Like sleep as little as you can, eat as little as you can. So that sounds like minimize. It almost sounds like neglect your body. It just means minimize it. Minimize it means is don't eat, sleep, and do what you need to do on a physical level more than you need to, because it's just taking time away from your spiritual practice. So if you need to sleep 8 hours, okay. If you only need to sleep 6, don't sleep more. That's the idea. So you can't neglect it. You can't sleep 4 hours and think that'll be okay. So it's understandable because we talk about neglecting, and it's understandable why somebody would neglect physically, emotionally, and so forth. But you can't. Our human and spiritual natures must work together to realize ourselves while we are embodied. Both aspects of ourselves must be nourished in order to be mentally balanced and whole. So, if you let's make it simple. Body, mind, soul. 3. If any one off balance affects the other one. We all know this. If you're ill, does it affect your Krishna consciousness? It definitely does. Sometimes you can't even get your rounds done. You don't have any energy. Does the emotional instability affect your Krishna consciousness? Of course. Does your spiritual standing affect you emotionally? Of course. If you're doing poor spiritually, your emotions are negatively affected. Do your emotions affect your body? Of course. So they're all working together. So no devotee should think that I can neglect everything and just focus on my spiritual life, because it won't work in the long run. It'll backfire. You have to be healthy in every way, which is obvious, but it's so obvious that it's often neglected. The obvious things are not always followed, or the obvious things are not always so obvious, unfortunately. Okay. While the result of our Krishna conscious practices are that we realize ourselves, the result of our becoming a fully developed person is our capacity to engage in heart-connecting relationships with others. This means we are able to be fully transparent with others. Meanwhile, appreciating and taking interest how another's experience is different from ours. So what, I think this is Rambaru speaking here. As far as I can tell, this is her article. So she's saying that you realize who you are, that's part of the process of Krishna consciousness. But unless we are a whole person, mature, healthy physically, healthy emotionally, healthy spiritually, our relationships are going to suffer. I might be becoming self-realized, but incompetent on the relationship level due to some other problem. Have you seen that, Tanya, in your temple? It's you would think the person who's more Krishna conscious would have the best relationships. The person who's least Krishna conscious would have the worst. Of course, we know that's not true. It's just, these are assumptions we make, right? It's possible the person who's very Krishna conscious has a nature that doesn't work so well for relationships. It's possible. So that's the point here, that, we tend to think that all these things are taken care of when we advance. Not necessarily. I'm not saying they're not for everybody, but not necessarily. Yeah, so I think we had read, maybe not yesterday, maybe not Monday, maybe last week, we had discussed that when these types of issues become problems for us, this shutting down, repressing, and so forth, the first thing it affects is our relationships. And sometimes why it's hard to recognize it or deal with it is because our sadhana may be going on just fine. It's just all around it. There's no relationships, nothing really. I'm being a little artificial, but I'm able to get up, do my sadhana. So then everything looks good. And I think, well, I'm fine. What's the problem? It's when you have to interact more closely, you realize how fine you may not be. So that's the point that Rambaru Prabhu is making. And the point that I'm making again and again is sangha is essential. So if you don't know how to relate well to people, even though you're doing well otherwise in Krishna consciousness, that could be a huge problem for you, because it's the most important. Getting good sangha is most important. And what I was talking about before, when you're alone, you develop certain attitudes. I've seen devotees who have developed some strange ideas. And often it's because they're just alone thinking in their head and they're not bouncing ideas off anybody. And you'll hear their ideas and you'll think, that's strange. I never heard Prabhupada say that. I wonder how they concluded that. Well, there's no one to bounce off. So even though they're quite scholarly and advanced, they can get a little too much in their head and lose some perspective that they would get through association. And so if they don't know how to associate well, then it becomes a real handicap. So relationships, extremely important to learn how to navigate that. This ability for open expressiveness and deep attunement is very rare in this world. It's especially difficult if you are relationally wounded. In short, Krishna consciousness is all too often used as a way to deny our human side by thinking that we need to ignore our human feelings. Now, this brings up another topic, relationally wounded. That means you had some problem with a relationship in your past. And that problem, if it's wounded you, creates problems for relationships in the present, which is understandable, right? You know, here in Alachua, here in this part of Florida, many parts we have alligators, and usually alligators won't bother you if you don't bother them. Let's say you don't really know that, you see an alligator, and I've heard if you try to feed them, they may try to eat you also. They won't stop discriminating what to eat and what not to eat. So let's say an alligator bit your hand. It's very rare that that would happen, but probably the rest of your life, when you see an alligator, you run. So you have a wounded relationship with an alligator, right? So we have similar wounds with human beings. So when we see this kind of human being, the authority human being, or the opposite sex human being, or the boss, whatever it is, it can trigger some bad memories. And those memories are within our body, not just our minds, as emotions. And it can trigger all kinds of negative emotions. That's what she's saying. That's what's being said. So she's saying to be open and honest with yourself and others is difficult if you're relationally wounded. And so, when you're relationally wounded, one of the strategies is to ignore, because it's a wound, and if you open it up, it hurts. So then naturally we think, well, time heals all wounds, so I'll just won't think about it and it'll heal. And sometimes that's true, usually not true. Sometimes it gets worse. So I woke up very early. That's why I'm moving slow. You notice I'm moving slow right now. I didn't go to bed early, but I woke up early. And so sometimes I just wake up early. And here I am, moving slow, firing on 3 cylinders instead of 4. Hare Krishna, right? Let me drink something, maybe I'll wake up. I'm also moving slow because I was studying something this morning very deep, and my mind is like, it's halfway in what I was studying. And it's so deep and so foundational to our whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness. My mind was absorbed there, and it's very much different than what we're discussing now. And I think I'm having a hard time shifting from that. It's kind of like I'd rather be talking about that right now. So it looks like I have 2 strikes against me. One more and I'll fall asleep while I'm talking. So let's see if we can try to navigate this. When you ask your questions, it'll wake me up a little bit. If we can hold a perspective that includes both our human and spiritual developmental needs, then we will not use the absolute truth to belittle relative truth. Prabhu, it's just Maya. Just forget about it. But it's a red light. Just a red light. It's Maya. This world is illusion. What do we care for the rules of this government? Just go. While it may be true that we are not our bodies, if we ignore or neglect our physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual needs, it can cause problems in our devotional lives. If we were transcendental, actually transcendental, above all 3 modes of nature, then in that stage, if you neglect your physical, it's not a problem because you don't really need to give much energy to it. You don't need so much. So what she's saying is you can't neglect what you need and think you're going to get away with it. It's going to come back to haunt you. In terms of living in this material world, being clear about what we need is one of the most important principles of healthy communication in relationships. The essential Vaishnava teaching of simultaneous oneness and difference, achintya bheda, bheda tattva. There's actually a song. Did you know that? There's a song sung by a group called the Kulik Shekars. And these were the words. Achinta Beda Beda Tattva. Pretty good lyrics, huh? Inconceivably and simultaneously one and different. Vaishnava teaching of simultaneous oneness and difference, Achinta Beda Beda Tattva, reconciles the mystery that God is simultaneously one with and different from his creation. Hold on. One who knows God knows that the impersonal conception and personal conception are simultaneously present in everything and that there is no contradiction. She's making the point, one and different. So even though the body is not that important, it's important. Even though it's material, it's spiritual because it's used for Krishna. Prabhupada explains, no one is independent. Every one of us is an expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This accounts for unity and diversity. There are diverse manifestations, but at the same time, they are one. In Vishnu, everything is an expansion of Vishnu's energy. The great paradox of being both human and parts and parcels of Krishna is that we are both dependent and not dependent. Part of us is completely dependent on people to satisfy our basic needs, like food, water, shelter, clothing, love, belonging, self-esteem, and inspiration, and help with our personal development. Although as spiritual beings, we are not dependent on anything in this material world, which is the absolute truth. Our human nature is. Although as spiritual beings, we are not dependent on anything in this material world, which is the absolute, that is the absolute truth. Our human nature is dependent, which is the relative truth. It's just the way it's written. So the absolute truth is we're not dependent on anything. And the relative truth is we are. We have a body. Of course, because our spiritual and human nature is completely interwoven, they cannot be kept apart. The more we realize ourselves as part of Krishna, the more we deeply recognize our interconnectedness with all living beings. So we can both be attached and non-attached, because non-attachment is about our eternal nature. And although attachment in the Bhagavad Gita suggests a grasping and clinging to temporary things, for one pursuing self-realization, in order to grow into a healthy human being, we need to have secure attachment in the positive psychological sense, which means having close emotional ties to other people that promote connectedness, grounded embodiment, and well-being. Hare Krishna. So, you know what I'm going to do now? We're going to go to the chat, and I'm so tired. Can someone read what's in the chat for me? This is hopefully how I'll gain a little energy. I'll just listen to you read what's in the chat because I haven't stopped talking. It's making me tired. So Tanya, you want to read what's in the chat? You'll be our moderator and we'll discuss.
So Hare Krishna, everyone. First, I posted a quote from the Bible. It's from the 1 Corinthians, and it's, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me.
Oh, nice. And also right above that, if you all look, here's where you can get the to the article we're reading, because so many were asking about it. So it's the second post, right?
It's the first in the general chat.
Oh, okay. It's the first post. So if you go to the top, the bottom of the first post, you can get that. Yeah.
And it's also on Facebook. So for anyone who wants to download it there. So then we have 2 comments from Adhokshaja Krishna Prabhu. Some grown-up people look pretty miserable.
Yeah, because they haven't grown up. But I think Hoaxer was saying, nobody wants to grow up because it's more fun to stay a kid and irresponsible. But when you're an adult, it's the time you're supposed to be responsible. When you're a kid, less responsibility. So when you become an adult, when you're supposed to be responsible and you're not, that's not fun anymore. It doesn't work. So now, Prabhupada put a huge responsibility on our shoulders. So we don't even have a choice of not being responsible. And so if any of you have this tendency to avoid responsibility, then I would suggest take up some responsibility immediately in Prabhupada's movement and stick it out. When it gets difficult, keep going. That will help you. Okay, we have another one from Anhokshaja.
ISKCON is like the Ganga, and some things floating in it are not pure.
Oh, you noticed that too. Yeah, of course. When we're more advanced, we'll see everything is just perfect, right? If you see ISKCON is not perfect, then we know you're not a Mahabhagavat. That's how we know. Yeah. So I think that point I was making is extremely important. That some things are going to float in that aren't so great, but our job is to learn how to deal with them in a great way. Okay, next one. You have a story for it?
Yeah, it's a story about Lord Buddha inviting Mara, who is the personification of the forces antagonistic to enlightenment, for tea. So the story, it's a little excerpt. Instead of ignoring Mara or driving him away, the Buddha would calmly acknowledge his presence, saying, "I see you, Mara." He would then invite him for tea and serve him as an honored guest. Offering Mara a cushion so that he could sit comfortably, the Buddha would fill 2 earthen cups with tea, place them on the low table between them, and only then take his own seat. Mara would stay for a while and then go, but throughout the Buddha remained free and undisturbed.
Oh, what about Jara? Did Jara come also? Old age?
He wasn't mentioned in the story.
Same idea though, right? Not afraid of death. Okay. Next one.
Gabriela says, there is a psychiatrist named Carl Jung who created the concept of the shadow in psychology, saying that all human beings have a shadow, that if we do not accept, integrate, heal, and if we do not take charge, that shadow can be expressed in dysfunctional way by hurting others, such as pathology, or by hurting the person, him or herself.
Yeah. And it's gotten worse since his time. Kali Yuga is progressing, so more people are acting in dysfunctional ways. Yeah, I mean, look what's on social media. I would be surprised that people would not be acting dysfunctionally. Right? Like crazy, right? Okay. So the song by co-exchange is called Tattva.
Yes.
Achinta Veda Veda Tattva. There it is. For all you rockers and rollers, Achinta Veda Veda Tattva. That's the song. It goes like this. Achinta Veda Veda Tattva. Achinta Veda Veda Tattva. Yes. Okay, next.
And then we have a comment from Malgorjata Krishna Karshani. Guru Maharaj.
Malgorjata.
Guru Maharaj, you said that sangha of devotees is essential. We know that there are people, including devotees, who are really bad with relationships. I am wondering that maybe for such devotees, it is better to practice Krishna consciousness out of sangha of devotees. Otherwise, they may ruin their spiritual lives, offending other devotees. What do you think, Guru Maharaj?
Well, if you take that to its logical conclusion, they should jump off a bridge before they ruin their spiritual life by offending devotees. So there's a verse like that. Mahaprabhu, he's giving this example that if you're going to do something that's going to potentially destroy your spiritual life, it's better you kill yourself rather than just kill your soul. So, of course, we're not recommending anybody kill themselves, but there's some value in what you say. Of course, obviously, the answer is that they should improve themselves so they can get the association. Or devotees, compassionate devotees can tolerate them and keep them happy and pacified so they can get association, which is the way they would improve. But there is Shastic reference to this idea of stay at a distance from the guru and the deity, because when you get close, you have the chance to offend them. But I think the problem, Krishna Karshan, is if you try to tell them that, they'll get more offended. So I'm not sure, how anybody could actually recommend that to them without making things even worse. Yeah, but you can have standards when you have your sangha. These are the standards of conduct, and if someone doesn't follow them, then they can be asked to rectify their behavior if they want to continue in the sangha. So that's there. Or sometimes what you said, it does happen that someone is being offensive, and they'll ask that person not to come, both for the person's benefit and the benefit of the other devotees and the sanctity of the other devotees, but also for their benefit. Of course, now with the internet, you don't need to be around devotees to offend them. You have 24/7 access to committing aparadhs. It's never been easier in the history of the universe to commit Vaishnava aparadh than it is today. You can have access to thousands of devotees instantly with one post. And the more slanderous it is, the more hits you will get. That's the unfortunate reality. Okay, next.
Jason asks, so what does a healthy sangha look like?
Everyone is hugging and kissing. Healthy sangha, I would say, one of the prime features of a healthy sangha is respect. Genuine affection, which is free from envy and competition. And a sangha where everyone is becoming more inspired. You come into a sangha and you feel inspired, that's very good. If you don't, there's something is wrong. Okay. Next.
And then Gabriela says, I have many friendships that have burned out with other senior devotees in the association itself, apparently due to the interpersonal skills of the devotees themselves. They have lived experiences of criticism, prosecution, authoritarianism, blaming, even punishment. So should exist within the preparation of a devotee, training in interpersonal skills and nonviolent communication as a way to maintain association, and that it is not damaged in the long term. Many devotees have incredible spiritual qualities, but in the social sphere, they bring many conditionings of the culture that affects having a healthy relationship with others.
Yeah. Let's do it, Gabriela. That was my plan 10 years ago. I mean, that was part of the reason I did the forgiveness course. I thought, well, that's one thing that everybody needs to learn to do. And then I think it's extremely important because many of us never had to really work with people that we didn't want to work with. Of course, in companies, you have to do that. But there's maybe a little more control or leverage. Because if the company doesn't like somebody, they just fire them. It's not that we do that in ISKCON. So helping devotees navigate relationships would be, I think, an essential indoctrination, for lack of a better word. And that would include how to respond with criticism, how to take it, how to give constructive feedback, how to give honor, how to take appreciation and praise when you get it, things like that. So, Gabrielle, you can put that on your to-do list of all the projects. You'll have to take 10 more births to finish. But this is something I have thought about that I think would be extremely useful, and it could make a big difference in the long run. Because you see, what's happening is, in terms of Shastric knowledge, everyone who joins ISKCON, we have the same knowledge. It's not like you meet a devotee and say, Haribo, spirit soul, and the devotee says, what's spirit soul? You're not the body, you're a spirit soul. Really? I didn't know that. We're not going to have that problem. But if we talk about empathic listening, then the devotee will say, what's that? They won't know. So we don't have across the board We have across the board that Shastra says relationships are essential, but we don't have across the board education about how to have good relationships. So if we did, and that was taught everywhere, then we would see a change, I'm sure, in relationships. So who's going to write the paper? Who's going to write the course? We already have you can teach nonviolent communication. You can teach lots of things. We need a course, 1 week course for everyone who joins. This could be one aspect of the course. Okay. Next.
That's all we have right now.
Okay. Hare Krishna. You remember that class I gave one day when I was tired and we just ended early? I woke up for the japa. And I said, maybe I'll be there for the japa. Maybe I won't. Kind of feel like that now. But I heard something this morning I want to talk about for japa. It's really nice. Do we have another question?
We have 2 new comments.
When the sangha doesn't breathe us in, breathe or bring, does it mean that something is wrong with the sangha or something is wrong with us? Could be one or the other or both. It's nice to start with ourselves. See if there's anything wrong there first. And it may be that there is, and it may be that there isn't. If, let's say, Olga, you're having a problem with the sangha, and you're the only one, and there's like 500 people, it's probably a sign that something's wrong with you. If you're having a problem with the sangha, and most others are having a problem with the sangha, probably means there's a problem with the sangha. So that's one way to know. Although you could be the only one having a problem because you're the only one who sees the problem. That could be there, but generally, probably that wouldn't be the reason. Until, but it could be. Okay. Next. It's a continuation of Olga's question.
Yes, Sharadia Rasa Mataji says she's enthusiastic to develop such a course in the future. Bharat Prabhu says, me too. Jason says that he can help with the course. And then Olga says, I had a situation where I felt bad in one sangha, but other devotees were inspired. I tried to work with myself, but this feeling never went away.
Oh, sounds like you need to talk to somebody about it. So Gabrielle is going to start a team. I have to be on that team because I have to tell you everything that I've seen in ISKCON that can go wrong. It has to be addressed as a preventative measure. Especially working in groups and working with authority. Okay, going back to Olga's question, it's possible that just your nature is such that it didn't work with a group, or it's possible that there's something you need to work on within yourself to be able to work with a group. And so usually it's best to start with the assumption that I need to work on myself. And then see what that might be. Just might mean being more tolerant. Okay, that's it?
That's it.
Can we end class?
No, there's one more on Facebook. It's from Shalini Mataji. She says, Maharaj, Envy is one of the biggest challenges we face in devotional life. Let's say one tries very hard to get rid of it through sincere chanting, but it remains. Does it mean one cannot go back to Godhead in spite of trying?
Envy? Is that what you said? Envy?
Envy, yes.
Yeah. Envy can only exist if you envy Krishna. So if you envy Krishna, definitely not going to go back to Godhead. So we can't kid ourselves that if I'm envious of you, it has nothing to do with my envy of Krishna. No, I wouldn't be envious of you if I wasn't envious of Krishna. You have something I don't have, and I don't like that. Well, if I'm envious of you, Krishna has way more than you have. So if I'm envious of you, I wouldn't be envious of him. He's got way more than you have that I'd like to have. How can we please Krishna? Olga wants to know how to please Krishna. Krishna consciousness means we please Krishna by thinking, how can we please Krishna? That's how we please him. And we don't please him by thinking how we can please ourselves. It's that simple. How can we please Olga? Let's all ask Olga what we can do for her. Olga, what do you need? We can do it. I want to make you happy. And Olga says, well, I need something. It's going to be difficult to get. And you say, doesn't matter. Just tell me. I want to please you. That's how you do it. Okay. That's it.
Looks like that's it.
So, Gabriela, I'm going to leave and come back, and you can do what you have to do. Okay. I hope I come back. I'll try.